Everybody, for our third meeting of 2021. We do seem to have had a lot of meetings this year. I think before we start, I'll move over to Derek and ask him to do the introduction to the virtual meeting and explain about the recording, and also to give us apologies, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning to everybody. Yes, I will remind everybody attending today, this will be a recorded session of all public business of the IJB, which will be made available online later this afternoon for the public to view. Members may wish to remember to switch their cameras and audio off until such time as they are participating in any debate or asking a question. If I could start with today's roll call. Good morning, Councillor Duncan. I've got you present. Luann Grujan.
Good morning.
Councillor Cook.
Good morning.
Councillor Bell.
Present like your beard.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. Councillor Leslie Dunbar.
Good morning.
Morning. Kim Crittenden.
Morning.
Good morning. Alan Gray has intimated he will come along in 15 or so minutes. John Tomlinson. On mute, but I can see you mouthing you're here. Thank you for that, John. Sandra MacLeod.
Good morning.
Alex Stephen.
Morning.
Morning. Dr. Caroline Howarth.
Morning, everyone.
Dr. Malcolm Metcalf.
Morning.
Chris Littlejohn. Chris did indicate he may not get along today. Mike Adams. No Mike Adams. Jenny Gibb.
Good morning, everybody.
Thank you. Jim Curry. No Jim Curry either. Graham Simpson.
Good morning.
Morning. Maggie Hepburn.
Morning, everyone.
Shona McFarlane.
Hi, good morning.
Morning. Alison Murray.
Good morning.
Morning. Howard Gemmell.
Good morning.
Morning. I'm here as Clark. Angela Scott, the ACC Chief Executive, I believe, has joined us today.
Good morning, Derek.
Morning. John Forsyth is attending today for Jess Anderson. John?
Morning, Derek.
Good morning. Jess has sent her apologies. And authors other than those members are present. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Derek. I think we've also joined by Lindsay Stodder from Audit Scotland. I think she's observing the meeting.
Yes, I am. Hi, I'll just put my video on. You can see me. Hi.
All right. Good morning. Welcome.
Morning.
Okay. Right. And Jim Curry's just said he's here as well. I did see him in the list, so he's put into the chat that he's here. Okay. So a couple of housekeeping things. There's no item 13, which is a reduction in rent. This item needs more work done on it before a paper will be presented, either to RAP or to the IJB. We have a 12-item agenda. And I would propose to observe the 1 minute silence at midday for the Day of Reflection. It's a year today since the country locked down for COVID. And I think it's appropriate, particularly given the sphere that we oversee, that we mark that. And so I'll be stopping business at midday if we're still going by then, for us all to reflect. Thank you. Right, any declarations of interest? Sorry, my screen has gone. Caroline, yes.
Yes, just the same as previously. There's mention of the 2 redesign in the Chief Officer's report, so I'll remove myself from the meeting for that section.
Okay, that's fine. I'll ask Derek to contact you to come back in when that section's finished. Thank you. I don't see any other hands. Right. Exempt business. We have one item, item 12, which will be taken in private, which is grant funding to counselling services. Okay, standing items. So now we're on to the minutes of the meeting of the 23rd of February. I'll take them both for accuracy and for matters arising, page by page. So page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9, page 10, and page 11. So we're content to approve those minutes. Yes, thank you. We now have the business planner. We're still doing work scoping out business post-May. Work will be done by the leadership team and the chair and vice chair to bring items forward. Yes, John.
Yeah, sorry, it was a very brief one on the business planner. It's on line 28. Yes, there's line 28. Talking about the local survey. So the last local survey we had, which came to the board back in November of 2019, which feels ages ago, was kind of a big all singing, all dancing one. And the other week on the 15th of March, we've got a kind of very brief, small survey on primary care, which is basically saying, are you happy to have care delivered by primary care professionals who aren't GPs? And are you happy to have remote consultations? Both of which I think are things that we've been trying to get done for ages. And I just wondered how those two surveys would mix with each other, what the relationship is. Will we be building the results of the current primary care one into the bigger one? Sorry if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. Alex, do you want to come in on this?
It's probably better for Alison in relation to the local survey.
Okay.
Yep.
Yes. Fine. Alison, good morning.
Morning. Yes, the local survey that we reported on in 2019 was the one that we had commissioned mainly to consider our progress or do a baseline, sorry, for our progress against the strategic plan. And we plan to repeat that. So that was an all-encompassing survey that looked at all of our services. And we plan to repeat that next year in 2022, which will be the end of our strategic plan, to demonstrate our performance from baseline for the 3 years of the strategic plan. But throughout the year, obviously, there will be, so for some specific work that we need to do, we might want to gather the views specifically of a particular part of our target audience, so our customers, patients. So that we will need to carry out small bits of consultation, but we intend to repeat the local survey again next year in its entirety, which will encompass all areas. But the report that's on the business planner in relation to the local survey, if you remember, we reported on those local outcomes, but there is a national survey as well, and we wanted to sort of check in how our local survey reflected on the national results, and we were waiting on the publication of the national results in order for us to report that difference or that comparison. So we've been unable to do that so far and remain unable to do that because the national survey results haven't yet been published. Although the survey was undertaken between January and February 2020, the work hasn't been done on collating and reporting those results. So I can only bring forward that comparison report once I have those results. And indeed, as you say, the longer we get away from those dates, perhaps we have to consider how valuable that will be at the end of the day. But yeah, it's still on the business planner as it stands.
Thanks, that's really helpful. And in terms of the primary care one that's just been launched, no apologies, Alison, if you're not the person who's responsible for that one. I just saw that and I was quite curious about it because it's talking about remote consultations. Given what we've been doing over the last year, I think everybody's got more comfortable with doing that sort of thing, whereas maybe even 18 months ago that wouldn't have been the case. I just thought it was quite an interesting thing to do. I'd be interested to see what the results are.
Absolutely. I mean, that one was specifically to feed into what we want our future GP services to look like. So we were keen to take a temperature check there, but absolutely. And I think, you know, we've been listening to some comments around about perhaps there being some reluctance, particularly perhaps in the elderly age group, about using remote. So we wanted to try and target, you know, and understand, you know, do we have these problems? What are they? And, you know, how can we build that into any future delivery?
Thanks, that's really helpful. As I say, it was more sparked by curiosity as much as anything, but that's helpful. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, John. Alex, and then Philip.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to go through a couple of items on the planner in relation to May. So the immunisations paper that's referred to in line 15, my understanding is that we've already brought that to the board, so I think that one can come off. On line 18, it talks about delay to June 2021 for the market facilitation statement. That should be July 2021. On line 20, which is the line, I think that, oh no, that's the line in terms of the independent review of adult social care. It refers to local government elections. It should be national elections, so Scottish Parliament elections. So just a typo there that needs to be resolved. In relation to the review of the scheme of integration, our intention is to push that back to near the end of the year once we find out what recommendations from the Feely report will be implemented, because that could have implications on the integration scheme. So given that we're within our 5-year limit, that would seem to kind of help in terms of just moving that stuff forward. The other updates that have been mentioned will come and are being worked on to come to the appropriate meeting. And I would just probably highlight that there appears to have been 2 local survey items on the agenda. It's duplicated within that in May, so one of them will need to come off. So Chair, just wanted to give you a quick run through that. As you say, there's still some work to do, pushing the timelines out a little bit in terms of looking at future meetings, and then dropping some of the regular reports and some of the work that we've got going on into that format, and we're looking to do that and bring that back to the next meeting.
Thank you, Alex. I'm content with all of those adjustments. It doesn't make sense to have another report on immunisations when we had a detailed report in the January meeting. Philip.
Thank you, Chair. So my question really is related to lines 7 and lines 24. So line 7 is that's for today's report, IGB scheme of governance annual review. Line 24 is incorporate review of ACC governance. So review of scheme of integration to incorporate review of ACC governance. However, so those are 2 different items. But if you look in the notes, 24, it says the board resolved on the 2nd of October to amalgamate the intended review of governance, ACC, report reference at line 21. Well, line 21 is actually Adult Protection Committee biennial. The planner with the intended review of scheme of integration reference at line 20, blah, the board agreed to. So I'm slightly confused by what that's actually telling me.
Okay, so the scheme of governance is our rules,
Yes.
basically our standing orders, which we've asked to come back today because we asked to see the marked up version to check all the amendments.
Yes.
But the scheme of integration is the services that are delegated to us from the partners. And actually, we wanted to take account of Aberdeen City Council's governance review, which happened at the budget. And we also do need to look at the impact of the Feely review as well. And we won't know how that's going to be taken forward until after the election. So they're 2 separate items. They're 2 different things. And that's why the review of our scheme of integration, which has to happen every 5 years, that's why we're delaying that, because as Alex has just said, we're still in that 5-year window to be able to do that.
Right, I understand that, but the notes associated with line 24 don't actually say that, though, do they?
Yeah. So the notes say that we agreed to defer it until February this year to allow for consultation with the constituent authorities. I think what we're agreeing to do is to delay it even further to allow for more time to do it. Yeah.
Okay, and the reference to line 20 in those notes. Oh yes,
that's a typo. I think that
yeah,
must be referring to a previous version of the planner, and the reference just hasn't been updated.
Convener, through yourself, I would confirm that would have been the line 20 at the time the note first went in, referring to that immediate meeting thereafter. My apologies to the board.
And well done to Philip for spotting it. Good. Anything else? Anything else, Philip? No? Okay. Alison.
Hi, yes, just about the immunisation. I believe in January it was agreed that we'd get more information about the HPV vaccines reported back.
All right.
I don't
Alison?
know.
Yeah.
Yes, we're doing a report on immunisations to the Clinical and Care Governance Committee. I think that's what was agreed in January. That's the action we've taken forward.
Okay.
Okay.
And
make
that's
sure
going
that
to
you
the
see
June
that.
meeting. Yeah, it's going to the June meeting of the of CCG.
Okay.
Thanks.
We'll make sure that you see that, Alison. Yeah. Thank you. I see Philip and Alison's hands up. I'm assuming they're leftovers, right?
no, they're like this owner. It's a leftover. I'm sorry.
Okay, no problem. Right, so that's the business planner. So we'll have a more detailed business planner for the rest of the year coming to the next meeting. So we're now on item 6, which is the Chief Officer's report. I think we'll start. This contains an update on the independent investigation into the complaint received about QC tender. So I think we'll take that part of it first, and that's Alex who's been dealing with that, and then we'll come on to Sandra for a discussion about the rest of the report, if that's okay with everybody. Okay, Alex, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. As IGB will be aware, we took a complaint, the 2C redesign process, to stage 2 investigation earlier this year. The complaint was subsequently reviewed by an external independent investigators, and the outcomes from the investigation are documented in the Chief Officer's report, which is before you today. In relation to the recommendations itself from the investigation, I can give you further information in regard to the actions that we're proposing to undertake. In regard to a register of interest refresher session, we'll be looking to set one of these up for the IJB over the next month. So you should get an invite in your diary in relation to that, and I would encourage you all to attend. The term vote in relation to staff consultation will be changed to survey for any future consultation or correspondence in relation to that as picked up by the investigator. A report will come before you in May, which you've just agreed in the planner on equality outcomes, and we plan to pick up the recommendation in relation to the equalities within that report. And the complaints handling recommendation was upheld, and as you were aware, at the last IGB, we agreed a new complaints handling process, and we're just waiting on some final comments from the SPSO so that we can add that to our web pages by the 31st of March this year. In relation to some of the wider implications of the 2C redesign project, the service provision in Old Aberdeen medical practice has been provided through an SLA, which you're aware of. The tender process continues, and there'll be a decision made at the end of May in relation to successful tenderers. The complaint that we dealt with, we took it to stage 2 and has been investigated. However, the complaint process is not finished yet, and there are means that this can be escalated to the SPSO and the Ethical Standards Commission. So I'm advising you of this, as given that the complaint is still active or live, there may be, I wouldn't wish to comment on the complaint in detail at this point in time, for fear of potentially compromising any further investigations that are likely to occur. On the 3rd of March, we received communication from the Frog Hall, Powys and Sunnybank Community Council, and they unanimously backed a motion which demanded an unreserved apology from the partnership for the way in which patients and staff had been deliberately and meaningfully shut out of the input into this process, a reversal of the decision to tender the practice in light of the conduct of partnership officers and the IJB chair at the meeting where the proposal to tender was approved, and the Old Aberdeen medical practice be promptly restored to its 2C status, and that the previous GP be allowed to return. This has been reported in the press, so I felt it was appropriate just to raise it to your attention, given that you may not have seen the local press, and our view is that the implications of this or these demands had been investigated by the external investigator during the complaints review. Chair, just one final thing from me. I'm happy to take any questions on the implementations of the recommendations, but I'm just I'm mindful again that the investigation is still live and active, and therefore there may be parts or questions that I can't answer to the IJB at this stage.
Okay, that's noted, Alex. Thank you. Philip.
Thank you, Chair. Could we look, I understand what you said fully, Alex, about the investigation is ongoing. Can we just look at recommendation 1 though, please, which has been published, and that's consider providing refresher training to IJB members on completion of register of interests. Now, my register of interests is actually it's just my council register of interests that are ported across. So by implication, I am not doing that correctly, and neither are member services, or have I misread that? Yeah,
no, it's not corrective, it's a refresher. So and there's more than just councillors on this board, and the whole concept of declaring interests isn't something that's kind of feature of normal business among other partners. So that's why the recommendation was made.
So for all, but I mean, surely...
We're not saying that you've done it wrong, Philip. We're not saying that at all. It's just it's a refresher for everybody, so we all have the same level of understanding about how to declare interest.
Right. So okay. Well, then I guess that then the implication there is that for all elected members to have a refresher, is it not?
But it's not just elected members on this board.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. So it's for members of this board to understand what the regime about declaring interests means in relation to IJB business. And there's different considerations to take into account, I think, for the IJB compared to the council.
Such as, I'm sorry to labour the point, but I'm just baffled, to be honest. But,
well, we have professional advisors on the board, for example, who might be working in services that might be affected by service change provisions that we are reviewing. So it's just, and that's not a normal feature of their daily working lives. So refresher training is always a good idea. It's always a good idea. Okay. I see Derek's hand up. Do you want to come in on this, Derek?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Through yourself, it was just to give Councillor Bell assurance it's not merely a copy over from his council register of interests. It is a bespoke, specific IGB focused registered entry that comes across that does reflect anything. Yes, the refresher training is appropriate, but it is a unique nomination that goes to the IGB. It's not just a council one copied.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. It is a complex area because, again, we're an amalgam of different cultures and traditions and histories. So, your hands down, Philip. Are you content now?
As content as I will ever be. Yes, thank you.
I I can't hope for any better than that. All right, John Tomlinson.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've got 3 questions to raise. They're quite quick ones. Just on recommendation 2, I appreciate that relates to staff, but it sounds like it could be appropriate for consultations with the public as well, just in terms of taking care on that particular point. So that's one question. The second one is the recommendation 4 is about regular review. So I appreciate we have reviewed it for the present time. Does that mean it gets into some kind of program of review in the future? Just wanted assurance on that. And then the third one, which probably isn't so much for an answer today, apart from, yes, we need to be mindful of it, is about the relationship going forward, and especially as it's still a live issue, as Alex has said, and there's maybe not a lot we can do about that right now, but clearly that's an aspect which I think needs to be picked up in the future, and so I'd welcome that we do return to that at some point that's appropriate. Thank you.
Okay, Alex.
Yeah, but I mean, I take the point in relation to the first point you made, John, and there's certainly something that can be considered. I don't think we've ever asked the public to vote, but there's certainly something about just being mindful of our language when going out there. The bit in relation to the complaints process, I would just say that we have, we will add that to our regular review of documents that need to be updated. So we do have. We've got a regular review of our standing orders and our governance scheme and so on, and that's before you today. Also our risk register and so on. So there are various documents that are part of an annual review process, and certainly that's something that could be considered in relation to this. But I think it's more likely in terms of complaints that the focus would be on giving you information in relation to the complaints process and how it's actually been operating and what's been happening in regard to that. Because once this is kind of fixed, that and been signed off by the SPSO and by the IJB, I'm not expecting there to be major movements around about that. But if there are areas of good practice that we need to pick up from the complaints that come in, then that's certainly something that we'd be willing and happy to do on a regular basis.
Okay, thanks.
And I would expect the outcome of complaints to be reported either to risk audit and performance or to clinical and care governance, depending on what the complaint was about. So I would expect for risk audit and performance to see a summary. Certainly complaints about the council and how the council operates go to their risk committee. Every year we get a summary of that. Mm-hmm. So we need to close the assurance loop on complaints, don't we? And maybe that's something that you and your committee could discuss, John, about how you'd want to see that coming to you.
Yeah, that would be fine. We'll pick that up. Yes, and that final point as well. I don't know if there's any comment on that. Just to confirm that we will revisit that kind of working relationship with the people who've been involved in this at some point in the future.
Yeah, we've committed to reporting back to the community and to the staff at the outcome of the tender process, and depending on what the tender produces, we may then actually need to go into formal consultation with the patient group about a change of service delivery. And I think that's partly where confusion has arisen about what's happened previously, because our decision was not about change of service delivery, although it has had an impact on service delivery in one particular practice. So we've already committed to go back out to people at the tender result is known, and we then have some understanding of how things might shape up going forward.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anybody else on 2C? No. Okay, that's good. And welcome, Alan. Glad you can join us.
Thank you, and apologies a bit late, Sarah, so thank you for that.
No problem. No problem. Right, Sandra, over to you for the update on the rest of the Chief Officer report, please.
Okay, thank you, Chair. The paper before you gives an update, as usual, on the key local, regional and national areas. I just have a couple of things I'd really like to highlight. One of the key things being the approach to the refresh of the strategic plan and the intent and the ambition of the plan is that this is co-produced with our communities from the outset, which is a different approach that we will be taking. The ambition is to reflect what matters most to the people within our communities and to have a much more targeted improvement outcomes. We expect and anticipate a plan that's firmly based on a strategy of early intervention and one which is firmly positioned within the wider system with direct links to our locality improvement plans and wider public services. We recognise that this is a new approach and the IJB and wider partners will benefit from support seminars, and these are already in place and planned to facilitate that. The activity timetable is clear within the report for any queries. In addition, I would also like to highlight that adult support and protection inspections will recommence. We're unclear exactly when we will be inspected, but just as an assurance or reassurance that preparatory work is undertaken and is underway with all partners working towards this at the moment. And that's really me, and I think Alex has covered quite comprehensively the 2C section in there, and if there's any questions, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Yes, Leslie and then John Tomlinson.
Thank you, Sandra, for your report. It's really informative, particularly I think about the co-production of the strategic plan that will just be starting really now, which is great. It's just a very brief question, Sandra. I know that you said there that there's some uncertainty about dates in regard to the inspections, so particularly the adult protection inspection. And would I be right in thinking there's a kind of notional time scale of 12 months, but there's some other authorities ahead of us, if you like, who'll be inspected beforehand?
That is my understanding, but I see that Claire's here and I'll bring her in if she's got any further comment. If that's helpful, Chair.
Yes.
Hi, Claire Duncan, lead for social work, but now Claire Wilson, just so nobody gets confused. Yeah, so it's a 12-month rolling programme of the inspection. So we could be any time within that timescale between March and April next year. We are thinking that we might be nearer towards the end of this year, beginning of next year, but we just don't know. So we're doing a lot of preparatory work. There's a lot of learning we've done from having the justice inspection. So our self-evaluations drafted, we're pulling together our joint self-evaluation, and that really identifies our strengths and weaknesses. So a lot of work. There's going to be a report coming to the Clinical and Care Governance Committee, but we're just we're preparing now to get inspection ready. But as I say, it could be any time. It could be in a couple of months. It could be in February next year. We just don't know.
Thank you, everybody. That's fine.
Thank you. John Tomlinson and then Luann.
Yes, my question is around the strategic plan. So I think this is excellent, Sandra, how you've set this out, and really welcome this. It is going to be a year of kind of learning for everybody around this, and so it's really just showing the interest and whether highlighting how seriously we're going to be taking the co-production side. If it's of help, there might be a number of people on the IJB who would be happy to come and observe some of the legs or other meetings, if that helps demonstrate the connection, and that would help our learning as well, I think, because if we're going to have a step change around co-production, it'd be really helpful to see some of that in action. And then the other point is just about the range of groups who will be contacted. I think maybe in the seminars that we have, we can pick up the detail around that and just see the range beyond the local groups into the more specific service groups. But really welcome this, and well done to everybody. Look forward to it.
Okay. Yes,
thank you. I was just going to say there, thank you. We'll certainly take those points on board and we can then link it in as required, and we'll keep it. I think at the seminar we'll get into a bit more detail, John, and that should help us.
Right, thank you. Luann?
Thanks. Very similar to John's point, and just really welcome the approach to the strategic plan that we're taking, and that the IGB and our communities are involved from the start, which is absolutely great to see. Just looking for assurance that we are thinking about reaching out to other groups such as LGBTQ community and ethnic minority groups who may not be fully represented through our locality empowerment groups. So just wanted to sort of flag that and see that there's a plan for reaching out to those groups.
I see Alison's ready to come back in if that's okay.
Yep.
Thanks, Sandra. Thanks, Luann. Yeah, just in case, in terms of the minority ethnic groups, we now have an equality subgroup as part of the planning group, the strategic planning group, sorry, and we have Greg and other organisations around about that. So we've already discussed with them how they can help us to reach out to these kind of groups. And when we bring our refreshed equality, our proposals for refreshed equality outcomes in May, that will include some of the activities that we plan to undertake to reach those hard to reach groups.
Thanks, Alison. That's really helpful. And my other point was just on the Chief Officer's report. It says that there'd be a verbal update on Operation Snowdrop at the meeting today. I don't know if there's anything, Sandra, you wanted to raise with us today. I think we're coming out of the emergency phase now, I understand.
We are, certainly we're moving towards the transition from Operation Snowdrop into moving out. NHSG are preparing plans to move out from civil contingencies into more business as usual. So that process is underway at the moment. From the impact from an IGB perspective, I think what that'll do is just reshape our capacity and put us be less pull on our time. But certainly the key agenda items such as vaccinations, test and protect, workforce, and surge and flow will remain priorities within that, so that there is planning and things that are underway on that.
Right, Philip.
Thank you, Chair. This is probably just my complete lack of understanding, but at 3.2, and it's good. It is a good report. It is undoubtedly. So it says we expect the plan will demonstrate our continued focus on prevention and early intervention. But then it caveats it by saying from a person-centered perspective. And I'm just wondering what that actually adds to the prevention and early intervention approach. I'm sorry, I'm being obviously, well, I don't know.
No, actually, I think that's a really helpful question, because I think we can all assume too much that we all have the same understanding of that. So I think that's actually a very, very helpful question, Philip. So I have an answer to it from my perspective, but my perspective will be different to other people. So I think we should probably hear from Alison or Sandra about that. Alison, is this you?
Thanks, I'll come back in that. Yeah, so everything that we do is from a person-centered perspective, or that's certainly our aim, because everybody has different needs, and whether that's at the prevention stage or whether that's at the early intervention stage, we need to make sure that what we are doing is appropriate for the individuals that we're dealing with. So we will always take on board the views of individuals and the specific needs of individuals, and that's what what I was trying to get at by saying that those two aspects, and indeed other aspects, are all from a person-centered perspective.
So if you had said what you just explained in 3 or 4 words, I would have understood what you were actually alluding to.
I apologise for confusing you, Councillor Bell.
I'm easily confused, don't worry. Thank you.
Yeah, see, my perspective on it, and why I'm so glad that we're doing the strategic plan that we have, is that quite often strategic plans start from the basis of this is what we're doing at the moment. How can we improve what we're doing at the moment? And we're just assuming that what we are doing at the moment is what patients and service users and the communities want. Actually, we need to completely reverse it. And instead of starting off from our template of this is what we're already giving you, do you like it or not? We actually need to go out and say to them, what do you need? without starting from our starting point at the moment. So it's a very different, and that's why having the local engagement groups working, doing this reach out to all the other groups that might not participate in the legs is really, really important, because we might end up with something completely different, which would be good. I think that would be success, actually, if we end up with something that's very, very different. We need services to fit around what people want and need, rather than expecting people to slot in with how we're willing to provide services, I think.
Thanks.
That's the ambition I have anyway. Right. Anything else? Okay, fine. I don't see any other hands on the Chief Officer report. So just a reminder for everybody that the first workshop on the path towards developing our new strategic plan, the first workshop's at 2:30 today. So I look forward to seeing as many of you there as possible. Right, thank you for that, Sandra and Alex and Alison. The next item is IJB membership, paper 7 on page 27. Derek, do you want to introduce this?
Yes, thank you, Chair, for that. The board has before it a paper on the IGB membership and appointment of the chair and the vice chair also. The paper broadly speaks for itself. However, the IGB standing orders require the constituent authorities to advise on their vote on membership. NHS Grampian and Aberdeen City Council have both nominated, as indicated at sections 3.2 and 3.3 of the report, which effectively is a continued membership. Section 3.4 also indicates the nomination by those constituent authorities of Luann Grujon to the chair after this meeting, and ACC's nomination of Councillor Duncan to vice chair. I can let the board know that ex officio roles are members until they leave, and the specialist advisors that are required to be in post on the IGB are also covered by other reports that have come to the board at separate times. Chairs of the committees has been discussed at the board meetings previously and follows board direction, which also gets covered in minutes. Convener, happy to answer any questions, but I would hopefully move that the recommendations speak for themselves. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So any comments or questions on this? No. Right. No, I don't see any hands. So I think, as Derek said, the paper does speak for itself. So we have recommendations on page 27, 28. We're endorsing the membership, which is a continuation of the current membership. We're endorsing the appointment of Luann as chair and myself as vice chair from 31st of March. We're instructing the Chief Officer to reconsider these arrangements prior to the 31st of March 2023. And we're asked to consider the requirements of the IJB standing orders and obligations of the constituent authorities in consideration of this report, as outlined at section 3.1. So that's the rules for holding office and when offices switch. So we've taken that into account in the previous recommendations. Luann, I see your hand up.
Thank you. Just if there are no comments from anyone else on it, I just wanted to extend my thanks, and thanks for the IGB to you, Sarah, for chairing for the past 2 years, particularly over the last 12 months when it's all been virtual, which has been really challenging for everyone, and to say how pleased I am that you'll remain as vice chair to support me, and that I'm really looking forward to taking on the role and working with everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's been the most interesting thing I've ever done, chairing the IJB, actually, and I think we've made a lot of progress, particularly given all the challenges that we've had over the last year in particular. And I'm very much looking forward to being a supportive vice chair to you, Luann. Thank you. Okay, So that's all the slushy stuff done now, thank goodness. So item 8 is the scheme of governance. This is a referral back from the previous meeting, and we have the marked up scheme of governance showing all the changes. So welcome, Kundai. Do you want to introduce this?
Morning. As Councillor Duncan has already summarised, this is a referral back report that most of you would have seen on the 27th of January. Just a few things that I want to clarify. In paragraph 3.5 of the actual body of the report, I'd like to highlight that it was actually on the 17th of March this year that the IJB was now put into the Civil Contingency Act 2004 as a Category 1 responder. However, by the time the legislation came into force, I hadn't had enough time for me to put the paper out to the committee. It would have been a late report if I'd done that, but that's just to highlight you on the update on that. And also, there's a typo on page 54 of the report. It will be found in section 10C. At the moment, it says that it's the clerk for the rep committee, and it should actually say it should be the clerk for the CCG meeting, which should be the Clinical Care Governance Committee. I'll open up the floor for any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kundai. Any questions on this report? No. Okay, I'll just bring one thing. It's relevant. It's a great piece of work. It's incredibly complicated doing this. So I'm very grateful to you for actually managing to give us a marked up copy this time. It's much easier to read. John Cook.
He said, no, all I was going to say was, yeah, it was really clear and easy to read it with the marked up copy. So thank you and well done. That was all.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, John. Great minds think alike, obviously. Leslie, over to you.
Hi, it was at 9.3. We talk about patients, but we don't talk about, you know, people who we wouldn't define as patients, who may be service users or clients. And I just wonder whether we need to kind of just amend the wording there so that it's clear that we're talking, you know, about everybody potentially that's using services.
Which page are you on, Leslie? Is that 9.3 of CCG or 9.
No, it's item 8, page 54. Sorry, item 9.3, page 54.
That would be, sorry, Chair, that would be the terms of reference for the Clinical Care Governance Committee.
Yeah.
I will have a look at that and then I will update that if all the members of the IJB are in agreement with that.
Yes, I think it's important we use inclusive terminology. I mean, it's one of the issues that bedevils us, isn't it? So yes, I think referring to patients and service users is more inclusive.
Thank you.
Thank you. Alison.
Hi, sorry, just adding to that, patient service users and carers would be good.
Okay.
Thank you.
I have noted that, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Right. We have a new recommendation compared to when this paper came back on the 27th of January. I'll just get the page up. It's new recommendation G on page 34, which is instructing the chief officer to scope the potential for hybrid IJB or any of its subcommittee meetings and bring a paper detailing the options to the IJB for consideration. Luann, do you want to say something about this? We've had lots of discussions about this.
I think the idea of blended or hybrid meetings are probably going to be an important part of the future, and but it's not a straightforward thing to do, so it's really important that that work is done to check out what IT and what building space is needed in order to allow that. So I'll be interested to see what comes back and see what's possible once Sandra and her team have had a chance to consider, you know, what's required. But I think it's part of the future that we should we should be looking at a blended approach.
Yeah, yes, I agree. Absolutely, I agree. There's no timing for that report back. I think we need to consider that when we're considering the business planner. So, and it is rather dependent on capacity to look at what facilities are available as we all come out of the pandemic. So, okay, John Tomlinson.
Yes, in fact, just on that point, I'm wondering if the blended approach extends to potential deputations as well. So it's maybe something to bring back or consider and bring back in terms of being inclusive, because there may be some who would benefit from that rather than actually coming to a meeting. Yep,
Absolutely. I think that's a good point, and that should be taken into account. Yeah. Right. So with that clarification of one of those recommendations on pages 33 and 34, we're approving the revised RAP terms of reference in Appendix A. We're approving the revised clinical and care governance terms of reference in Appendix B. We're approving the revised standing orders in Appendix C. We're approving the revised roles and responsibilities protocol in D. We're noting that the City Council reviewed its scheme of governance on the 3rd of March, and the changes have been incorporated and are outlined in paragraph 3.5. We're endorsing the extension of Leslie and John's terms of office as chairs, respectively, of the subcommittees. We're scoping the potential for hybrid meetings, and we're noting that the integration scheme review has been delayed to take account of the independent review of adult social care, as we discussed in the business plan item earlier. Okay, so we're happy to agree all of those recommendations. Great.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Agreed.
Right, we're on to item 9 now, page 87. If you just give me a minute to bring the paper up. It's category 1 responders. Good morning, Martin.
Morning, Chair. I'll just introduce the report. So the purpose of the report is to provide the IJB with information of the inclusion of IJBs as category 1 responders in terms of the Civil Contingency Act 2004. And as Kundai mentioned previously, this inclusion came into effect last week on the 17th of March. So the report outlines the background to the Act and the governance arrangements in place in the partnership, as well as in NHS Grampian, Aberdeen City Council and the wider Grampian area through the Grampian Local Resilience Partnership and the North Region Resilience Partnership. So within the Aberdeen City Health and Social Care Partnership, the report outlines the current governance arrangements in place that feed into those wider structures and explains the close working relationship and arrangements already in place in this area, which includes the Chief Officer attending meetings of the Grampian Local Resilience Partnership. The report outlines the specific duties that category 1 responders are required to undertake and provides information on arrangements in place and plan to fulfil these duties. So looking at the next steps in order to progress this, it is proposed to hold an early meeting of the Partnership Civil Contingency Group to assist in the operationalisation of the category 1 duties and to agree amendments to that group's terms of reference. In terms of informing the members of the IJB, it is proposed that an annual resilience report be submitted to the IJB to provide assurance on the resilience arrangements in place within the partnership and IJB in fulfilment of those duties as a category 1 responder. In terms of governance, the Chief Officer will be carrying out these duties and roles and will have a formal presence at the Local Resilience Partnership, and it is proposed that the Chief Officer's Aberdeen City Council delegated powers be added to as detailed in this report. The report also asks if the IJB would want to capture a risk on the strategic risk register to reflect the details in the report. The report recommends that the IJB note the inclusion under the Act, instruct the Chief Officer as its accountable officer to carry out the duties on its behalf, instruct the Chief Officer to bring a report annually providing assurance on the resilience arrangements, and also to agree whether to include a risk on the risk register. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Actually, I have one. We are asked to consider whether Luann, yes, Luann and John.
Thanks, Sarah. Well, two things from me. Just just to get a sense of what training is required for leadership team members and also potentially for the IJB on this new requirement is one question. And secondly, and it's a broader observation of what I've picked up. One of the challenges, I suppose, when we're in an emergency situation is how we have community experience, community voices heard around these tables. And I wondered if that is a role for the chief officer at that table and whether there's been some thought about how, in the future we could include more community perspectives in these emergency situations. So there's my two questions, Martin. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Luann. In terms of the training, I've been in touch with the Scottish Government who have said that training will be made available nationally. So we're just awaiting that, and I think we'll be hopefully encouraging members of the leadership team to be part of that training as well, if possible. If not, then we could see with a separate session could be set up for that. Certainly, I think in terms of lessons learned from incidents, etc., I think it'd be a good idea if we could capture the community perspective. So yes, I'd be happy to look at that when we're kind of feeding back, as part of the assurance to the IJB. Thank you.
Thank you.
John, and then Angela.
Okay, thank you. It's on this point about the risk register or not. I see if we're going to get an annual report, we will have a specific look at this on a regular basis, and that might suffice. So I'd quite like to hear from people, possibly Sandra and Angela, on whether we should also do the risk. I think in principle, we should do from the IJB side whatever is needed here to make sure that we're giving the support. We're asking Sandra, the Chief Officer, to take this on our behalf, but would need to hear if we are prepared. And indeed, hopefully in future years, we don't have to have the same year as we've just had, which would make it even more important that we don't lose sight of this. So I think I'd like to hear a little bit more from the Chief Officer and possibly Angela as well, to give us advice on how to handle this.
Yeah. That was my comment, John, as well. Angela, do you want to come in on this? And then we'll ask Sandra too as well.
Yeah, happy to. I think given that it's a formal statutory duty now being placed specifically on the IJB, John, I would encourage you to include it in your risk register. It certainly sits within the council's corporate risk register, and I understand it sits on NHSG. So I would encourage you to do that. I just think that because government's moved to now regulate it, I would encourage you to do that. I think just picking up maybe a couple of the other points that have been made in the meeting so far in terms of community involvement, clearly throughout the pandemic through the LRP structures, and I know that Maggie Hepburn is here. ACVO in particular have played an important part of all of the response. Through the community planning partnership, we've been having a discussion around going forward, how do we build on that community involvement in resilience, because I guess ultimately the first line of defence is community. So statutorily the civil contingency defines us as the first responders, but as we know, actually we're not the first, it's community. So how we build on community response in terms of community resilience as being the first line of defence is something that the community planning partnership wants to progress. And there was a paper, and again, colleagues, happy to get that circulated to all the board members here. There was a paper at the recent meeting of the CPP asking officers to come back with proposals. So I would encourage the IJB to sit within that broader discussion about community involvement in civil contingency through the CPP. Clearly, there's an aspect that the IGB and throughout the pandemic has evidence it's taken the lead role in what's referred to as the care for people agenda, and that's clearly where the partnership's strength lies. And of course, it would be important that the IGB was articulating that ask around support from community in that context, as the partnership has done throughout the pandemic. So I think it makes sense to make sure this is a joined up approach to community resilience. We have some communities across Aberdeen where there are already community-led resilience plans, but the challenge in urban environments in comparison to rural environments makes it slightly more challenging. A lot of rural communities find it quite straightforward to create this. It's the nature of those communities, but of course the anonymity sometimes in bigger cities makes it a bit more challenging. So I would encourage you to engage in the CPP discussion about how we really embed a community resilience as part of first response within the civil contingency. And in terms of John's question, I would just encourage you to include it in your risk register, given the statutory duty now being placed. And the only other final point, Sarah, with your indulgence, just I wanted to go on record to thank the IGB for the support to the pandemic. What's been described in legislation now is actually how the city's IGB has conducted itself entirely throughout the pandemic. You've engaged at RRP, LRP, City and NHS Grampian, and have been a formidable partner. So I don't think there's anything to be nervous of in terms of the statutory duty, because this partnership has behaved in exactly the way that the legislation is setting out. So I just wanted to pass on my thanks to the partnership, Sarah, for the formidable contribution that they've made to the pandemic response.
Thank you, Angela. Yeah, that's good to hear. I mean, I have to say my reaction when this proposal came through as category 1 responder was, but this is what we're already doing. So yeah. I hear what you say, Angela, about including it in the risk register. I have 2 questions about that. One is what's the best way for us to properly do that? And 2, do we need a separate risk, or can we weave it in among the existing strategic risks? And I'm not sure that actually having a discussion right now about that is the right way to proceed. Actually, could we task Martin and John as chair of RAP to go away and consider that, and for RAP to consider a paper that then comes back to the IJB for approval? That means that we get it right, because we have to be very careful that we don't have a strategic risk register that isn't strategic and that is too all-encompassing, goes far too much down into the operational detail. So what's views on that proposal for how to take that recommendation forward? Angela?
Just to make an offer of support to Martin and John, Sarah, to help offline in framing that. I think you're absolutely right. There's a clear definition that we need to prescribe, and then be really clear about the control and the mitigation that the IGB is responsible for, distinct for what NHS Grampian and ACC, and then in the LRP. So having the risk definition and the clarity across all of the structures, I think that would be really helpful. So happy to pitch in and help colleagues off table on that one.
Okay. John, are you content with that as chair of the committee? I've given you 2 extra bits of work today. I'm feeling very bossy.
As you leave office. No, that's absolutely fine. I think that's a very good way forward, very appropriate. Obviously, we'll hook in Alex on that and Sandra as needed, but yes, that's fine.
Okay, and as part of the business planning process for the IJB, if you can, Martin will keep us correct, actually putting the final recommendations for the risk back onto the business planner would be great. I mean, we see the strategic risk register once a year anyway, so it might be timely just to include it with that. Okay, any other comments on this? No. Right. Just for the record, the recommendations are pages 87 and 88. So we're noting the inclusion of the IJB as a category 1 responder. We're instructing the chief officer as our accountable officer to carry out on its behalf all necessary arrangements to discharge the duties on the IJB under the 2004 Act. We're instructing the Chief Officer to bring a report annually, providing assurance on the resilience arrangements in place to discharge the duties on the IJB under the 2004 Act. And we, in recommendation D, I think we need to, we've agreed to include a risk on the strategic risk register, and we've delegated responsibility for amending the strategic risk register to the chair of RAP and officers, and with a report to come back to the IJB at a future date. Is that recommendation clear enough, Derek? The amendment to D?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Got that. Couldn't get my mic on.
Okay, right. That's great. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Martin. Item 10 now, the criminal justice inspection. Good morning, Leslie.
Good morning. This is about the inspection of Justice Social Work Service, and the purpose of the report is to highlight the recent publication by the Care Inspectorate of its inspection report in relation to the Partnership's Justice Social Work Service. And just a bit of background of the information. The Aberdeen City Council was advised in 2019 November that an inspection of Justice Social Work Services in respect of community payback orders was to be undertaken by the Care Inspectorate. This was going to be the 5th inspection of a local authority in Scotland, specifically in relation to justice, social work and community payback orders. It was due to be commenced in with the inspection file reading in January, February this year, but actually what happened was that once we had got the file reading undertaken, pandemic struck, and just before we were due to the next phase of the inspection, which is we've done the case file reading. The next phase in the inspection was to meet with individuals who are or have been subject to community payback orders, and that would have been followed by meeting with staff and other stakeholders, but because of the pandemic, the inspection had to be paused. What that meant was that we were left in a kind of a limbo, but eventually it was decided that it would be a good idea to reinstate the inspection towards the end of the year. And in early this year, we took part in a further kind of virtual inspection. And the report has recently been published. And in terms of the inspection, what they eventually did was they engaged with 46 individuals. The idea was that what would have happened in the past is that they would have done face-to-face work with individuals who were recipients of CPOs, who were on CPOs, community payback orders. But what actually happened was that they would do that virtually. So we had to reorganise the whole inspection to enable them to do that. And there was some consideration that that would make it very difficult, and that accessing clients would be hard, given the distance. It was a year later by the time they actually got to that stage. However, what inspectors were saying that actually ended up being very positive. Individuals subject to payback orders were more than happy to give information. So that was the next stage of it. The following stage was they then had 14 conversations with 14 justice service stakeholders, including the police, the FOI, sheriffs, MAPA coordinator, housing, health, etc. And then that was followed by 48 meetings with 48 members of staff involved in the service. And on Tuesday, 23rd of February, the Care Inspectorate published their overall report. And the report, well, at that stage, prior to the inspection, we had to put in a self-evaluation, and their feedback on the self-evaluation is that it was very thorough, it was honest, we knew our service, we knew our service users. And so when we got the feedback, the way the feedback comes is in an overarching report, but there are 5 areas which are scored. And in terms of the scoring of the areas, the improvement on life chances is number 1. Improving the life chances and outcomes for people subject to community payback orders, we scored good. Impact on people who've committed offences, excellent.
assessing and responding to risk and need, good, planning and providing effective intervention, very good, and leadership of improvement and change, very good. Inspectors also were saying that in the narrative that service users experience the service as transformative, and that it was seen that we're going up above and beyond in terms of delivering services to individuals. Delivering highly person-centred interventions, a relationship-based and trauma-informed, a clear focus on early intervention, leaders demonstrating a strong vision for change, and I suppose our self-evaluation had also demonstrated that we knew what we were good at. We also knew and fessed up to the things that we were not so good at. And we also knew what we needed to improve and had kind of plans in place to do that. They identified a strong commitment to continuous improvement and identified that performance trends were improving across the service. They've identified following areas for improvement for the service, which was about enabling robust oversight, increased ability to demonstrate outcomes and impact, and that senior officers should ensure that justice service delivery plan and performance management framework are agreed and implemented, and associated reporting cycles established, and to ensure the effective delivery of key processes. Senior managers should further strengthen quality assurance mechanisms to support the consistent, confident and timely application of risk assessment and case planning processes. They were confident in our capacity for improvement, but we wanted us to have our delivery plan in place and linked to performance framework and quality assurance plans. I should point out that community payback orders are just part of what we do, and we have about 900 a year out of probably about 1,400 clients at any one time. We are therefore recommending that the Integration Joint Board note the contents of the report and the Care Inspectorate report which was attached, agree the contents of the inspection report action plan, and ask that a workshop be facilitated for the IGB to have further discussion about the scope and performance of the justice framework, and agree that the Justice Social Work Delivery Plan should be presented to a future meeting of the IJB for approval following consultation in respect of the draft plan. And I'm happy to take any questions, comments, whatever.
Thank you very much, Leslie. John Tomlinson and then Leslie.
Just a quick comment. Very good report and well done. Just on, I've got an echo here. You can hear okay. Page 101. It talks about the good professional relationship between individuals and practitioners, and I'm sure that was a very important bedrock to the work that you've done. So when we have the seminar on this, it would be good to hear what, how that was developed, what it was based on, and I think that's quite instructive for all of our services, just that relationship, and then how that becomes a foundation. So well done, everybody.
Yes, thank you, John. I'm sure there's universal lessons that can be learned by other services. First of all, from how you approached your self-evaluation, and the fact that you were honest with yourselves, and actually then about how you gel a staff team together to think about continuous improvement all the time, without it being seen as a burden and a tick box exercise, because you've clearly done it properly. And so I'm sure that there's things that other parts of the system can learn from you, which is very encouraging. Leslie.
Thank you, Leslie, for your report. It's really informative and it's very commendable, I think, you and your staff team in terms of what you've achieved and what's being recognised, if you like, by this inspection report. I suppose my questions may be more of a comment, but it seems to me that there's a kind of context here in terms of how the service, if you like, aims to reduce offending by, I think you call it, promoting desistance. And I recall being at a director of social work conference some years ago where the chief officer of Polmont was talking about her ambition in terms of having no youth offenders coming to Polmont. And I know that there was also an ambition or an aspiration around women in terms of women offenders who end up with custodial sentences. So I just wonder, in that kind of much wider context, if you'd like to kind of comment on this report and what it's showing in terms of that if that's a journey that we're on, how well we're doing with that journey.
I think one of the things that we've done over the years is prioritise both young people and women offenders. And in terms of, I suppose more recently, the links with the LOIP in terms of reducing what's been done to reduce offending for young people. In the earlier intervention, we're beginning now to see the earlier intervention is tracking through. So what we're looking at now is that the number of young people going to custody and coming into the adult justice system has decreased exponentially over the last 5 years. You can see it very, very clearly, to the point now where we would be looking as far as possible to try and keep people out of custody, or out of the system altogether, wherever possible. And ideally out of custody. And I think, as far as I can remember, over the last 2 years, we haven't had any 16 or 17-year-olds given custodial sentences from here. In terms of women, again, the women that we see now are very different to the women we might have seen 20 years ago. And the majority of women, when they come into criminal justice now, are very damaged, very often have had children who are no longer and have not been with them for many years. And so the input that we give them, that we have the benefit of having a women's service and a women's centre, and the things that we know that work for women, for example, having a safe environment, a supportive service, relationship-based, not re-traumatising, and those kinds of things are what we're working on in relation to women. But a lot of the things that we've learned in terms of working with women had actually beginning to be transferred into what we know. Some of them apply equally to men, but we're not quite at that stage yet. But yeah, it's been a big journey, and we still do prioritise young people and women because we know that that has the longest lasting effect, if you like, and a wider cascading effect. Yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I think it does. If I could maybe just ask, is there any unintended outcomes of this as an approach?
Oh, that's a very hard one, and I don't think so. I'm not aware of it so far, and I think that it's really important. I think it's not necessarily unattended outcomes, but I think we're just beginning a journey of getting, I suppose, linking in and working more widely across services. So, for example, in terms of substance misuse services, we're just looking at a kind of how do we do a shared care approach in terms of substance misuse services, and I can see that we might widen that approach, or the way that we're working there with other agencies.
Was Claire hoping to come in as well there?
Yeah, I think she was. Claire, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I mean, I was actually going to come in and answer, but Leslie said a lot of what I was going to say. I suppose just going back to the young people and women, it is very much about our approach within the LOIP. We've got our community justice outcomes that is integrated within our LOIP. So a lot of that work is that really upstream, that early intervention, prevention. We have moved on so much with the young people whole system approach. You know, many years ago, we would have seen young people coming into the justice system with 3 or 4 community payback orders, which you think we're failing. If a 17-year-old has 4 community payback orders, we're getting something wrong. So we've done a lot of work. And as Leslie says, we're wanting to keep them out of the system. And I think collectively, we've done that very well in our justice group. Diversion, obviously we're trying to upscale our diversion so the young people are diverted away from that. There's a lot of joint work with children's, police, procurator, fiscal, so a lot of good work going on, and I think we are really on the road to where we want to be in terms of keeping people out of the justice system. We want to keep those who are high risk, that are obviously should be on CPOs to protect the public, and very much so, but young people, yes, rates have dropped in custody and in orders as well. And as Leslie says, we have a very good women's centre, so that women centre would be working with people even from the point where they're in custody, so even before they're convicted, they're offering support for that woman. So I think that was all. As I say, Leslie said everything I was going to come in and say.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Luann and then Maggie.
Thank you. Just congratulations to you and the team on this report. It's really, really fantastic. And to get an excellent for impact on people's lives is just outstanding and really, really hard to get. So I think just please pass on the IJB's thanks and congratulations to everyone involved. I'm sitting here thinking about how do we, you know, take your experience and learning and sprinkle it elsewhere in the system, because there's going to be lots to learn from how well you're engaging with people who can potentially be challenging, have trust issues, all the sort of trauma-informed stuff that you referred to. And I'm wondering in particular about how linked in you are with mental health services, and has there been involvement to date from criminal justice with the mental health pathway redesign? Because I think there's obviously very strong connects, and often it might be the same people in both services. So just wanted a sense of, are you linked into that already, or could we be strengthening those links to support the mental health redesign?
I think there's a very slight link, and we could definitely strengthen it. But I think there's still some confusion, is possibly the word, about the difference between mental well-being and mental health, or mental illness, if you like. And I think in terms of the mental illness, people are linked in well when they have a diagnosed mental illness. I think the other issue is that the number of people that we have whose mental well-being is very concerning, and actually one of our support workers just came in this morning to say that there were six people in custody yesterday because they had attempted suicide. And when you hear something like that, you think, actually, there must be something we need to be doing differently. But yes, we need to have better links, I think, yes. Improved integration.
Mm-hmm. The next step forward, I suppose, really.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Claire, do you want to come in on this?
Yeah, I was just going to say we're obviously we are linked in with the mental health, and we've been around the Action 15, a lot of that work groups. I think Leslie's right, we have to distinguish between mental illness and that lower level mental well-being, and we are upskilling the staff. I mean, the links we're making with substance misuse and the mental health is around that, as Leslie said, around that shared care. So we're not this separate services, that we're really working together. And I say together as in we're both holding the case, we're both working together. So there's a lot of improvements and a lot of work we're doing in that area. But it'd be better in terms of the pathway and how people in the justice system access the mental health support that they need.
Yeah, no, I can see that this service's input into redesigned pathways might actually enable us to intervene even sooner for people at risk. So I would encourage us to take that approach forward and to include you in the pathway redesign that's going on at the moment. Maggie.
Hi, it was actually a question related to mental health as well for the first part, which has been answered. And it was just a little bit of a sympathetic nod there to sometimes when you do things extremely well and get fabulous reports, everybody wants a piece of you, and a bit of I just wanted to sort of say, you know, don't be alarmed that people will be probably chasing after you. I think that's such a good thing. I mean, the fact that we've got this such an interesting report, and there's so many good parts of it, that especially from my perspective, from a third sector point of view, that the mention of the partnership working being so strong has been a real plus, and it's a real pleasure to read. On that point, what I was wanting to ask was, did you have any plans to do any promotion or sharing of the sort of stories of the report and the kind of work behind it in any way? And was there anything particular that partners you'd be wanting from partners around that?
Claire, do you want to come in?
My perspective, I don't think I've got there yet. Claire probably has all sorts of ideas.
Yeah, I had my hand up and then I went to put it up and it was already up, so I took it down again. So so a couple of points. So you're right, the learning from this inspection has been invaluable. And I think we have to share that, you know, we can't keep it to ourselves. And I think you know, this was our first single agency inspection since under obviously the delegation. So the way we approached it, I think, in terms of the methodology, especially the virtual way that the inspection was done, I think the learning from that will be invaluable. And even going through the self-evaluation, there was so much to learn in just how we approached that. So what I was aiming to do was, once we get our delivery plan in place, I would be doing some sessions. You know, we're having a session with the IGB, and that is around just learning more about justice social work, because it's a very large service. It links in with a lot of our services and what we're trying to do. So yes, we will do some sessions in terms of the learning from that, but also how we raise the profile of justice social work and really further I suppose embed our integrated working and how we've got this shared values and what we're trying to do. One of the things why we got the excellent from the K Inspectorate was around basically the relationships and that stickability that the service has with clients, and they said that that was the most important thing in terms of when you are working with people who are chaotic, they're vulnerable, they're hard to reach, they're hard to engage with, and they said the stickability was that thing that really stood out for us. And I think the learning for all the services around that is, you know, that stickability, assertive outreach, really a lot of learning for services, and obviously will help people. So I don't know if I'll answer your questions. We'll do some sessions, Maggie.
Thanks. It does answer my questions about the learning. I think I was just really thinking about it from a promotional point of view. I know it sounds a bit strange, but there's so few good news stories around this cohort of young people that I sometimes feel it would be nice to actually, in terms of educating the general public about what the actual work is and what it really means to people in their lives and how it helps them turn themselves around. I was just really about that, Claire.
Yeah, because we aren't very good at blowing our own trumpet, and I think you're right. I think there's something here, especially with the agenda for community justice, is really educating the public and community in terms of justice social work. So trying to move people away from, you know, punishment and prison, thinking that that's the only option for people. So there was a write-up in the paper in terms of the inspection, but I think there's something absolutely that we can release to say, you know, this is what we do, this is what the outcomes are for people, and really help them understand that. The inspection paper is going to a number of committees. It's also going to the community justice group. So the community justice group, in terms of their engagement plan, I think there is something that we should put out there into the public, into the community, just raising that profile. And as you say, it shows the good outcomes for that people in the work that we do, and it kind of lets the public have a different view upon it.
Yep, Leslie and then Angela.
Just very quickly, one of the other things I think what Claire's saying is absolutely right. The relationship is really, really important, and the combination of the relationship and multi-agency working. But that multi-agency working with one client doesn't mean lots of different services is not necessarily better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So yeah.
People absolutely can feel bombarded, and alienates them from the system even more, because it exposes just how big and complicated the system is that they found themselves in. Yeah, absolutely.
It's the importance of the key person with whom you have the relationship, and using that almost to broker all the other services, and the model that works. Yes.
Okay. Right. A good point, well made. Angela.
It's been a really helpful discussion and hearing the IGB board react to the report, and wanted to just underscore Maggie's point around you know, often the public's view around young people, and I think what Maggie is really nudging us to do is to really promote the really positive story that this report says about the young people of Aberdeen. So I think that's worth just underscoring, and really thinking about the whole promotion of that in quite a significant way, both in terms of media and social media, to start dispelling some of the myths that are attached to young people. So I thought that was a kind of really helpful nudge, and I'm just underscoring your nudge, Maggie, to us as a kind of collective to make sure that we do follow up on that promotion. Really struck by the comments from the board around the learning and the transferability of the learning. And I think that from my perspective as kind of chair of the city's chief officer group, I think the depth that the team took to the self-evaluation is definitely a practice that we do want to spread. And I was just thinking, Sarah, within your structures of this board, whether there's one of your committees that we could be looking to look formally at that approach to self-evaluation and how we can spread that practice. So maybe just something to try and land in relation to that. And then really struck by Claire's points around, and Leslie's, about the nature of the relationship, and I guess that often when we do reviews of cases, what we find is that our service users are touching with 100 different parts of public service, and it makes it quite difficult. So there is something, I think, more formally around the review of the approach, that kind of making every contact count, but how we've got a kind of pecking order to that contact with this client group, that I'd in particular be interested in trying to take some of that into both the COG, Claire, as well as the CPP management group, because I do think there is formal learning in the way that a number of board colleagues have. So I'm be keen to work with Claire and Leslie about how we can share that reflection and those suggestions for improvement in other parts of services that we provide, and we could do that through the CPP management group, which would allow us to do that multi-agency. But certainly from my perspective, the approach to self-evaluation was very honest, it was very clear, but it was significantly underpinned by evidence, which meant it was then reliable, I think, for the care inspectorate. So I think that is definitely worth us sharing that, particularly against the backdrop of an upcoming multi-agency adult protection inspection. I know that Claire in particular is around all of that as well. So I think we should definitely look to develop our thinking around approach to self-evaluation. But again, just well done to the team. You know, to have an inspection report that says we're transforming lives, I don't think you could get much better than that.
Yeah. Yes, thank you, Angela. Yeah. The whole business about how we embed good self-evaluation as a continuous practice rather than something that has to be done just to prepare for an inspection is a really interesting one. It's a slightly different angle on improvement methodology, but it might actually be more accessible sometimes for some services. So I think we need to reflect on Angela's suggestion about how we take that forward as a health and social care partnership and what the appropriate way to do that is. So I think Luann and I will definitely have discussion with the leadership team about that. Right, your ears ringing with praises, which are all thoroughly justified and well deserved. I think we've come to the end of this session. So again, I'll just say again, very, very well done. You are a credit to public service, and you are showing how some of the most vulnerable people in our city can be properly helped. And for that, you deserve all the praise you get. So very well done again.
Thank you very much indeed. I will feed that back to the team.
Good.
Thank you.
Good. Right, I'm proposing we're about to go into the medium-term financial framework, which is often something we need an ice pack to consider properly. And I know Alex is very anxious to get on with this. I'd like to take a 5-minute break before we start that, if that's okay. Derek.
Thank you, Chair. Can we just do the recommendations?
Oh yes, sorry, we were so full of praise that yeah, we were not doing the recommendations. Okay, recommendations pages 97 and 98. So we've noted the contents of the report, just checking on the right thing, and the Care Inspectorate report. We've agreed the inspection report action plan. We're instructing the Chief Officer to facilitate a workshop for the IJB to have a further discussion about the scope and performance of the Justice Social Work Service. And there's a couple of suggestions for content of that workshop in the chat for this meeting. And we're going to agree that the Justice Social Work Delivery Plan should be presented to a future meeting of the IJB for approval following consultation in respect of the draft plan. So we'll make sure we incorporate that in our business planner going forward as well. Agreed? Seeing nods, that's good.
Agreed.
Right, I was so anxious to get off to the loo that I was kind of missed the recommendation.
Yes.
Okay, if you don't mind, we'll take a 5-minute break and we'll come back at just before 11:45 to do the medium-term financial framework. All right. Thank you.
Alan, could I possibly take this opportunity just to say that you're greyed out. You with the lights coming streaming from behind you. You're just a dark shadow. Yeah, that works if you're sort of hugging the display.
Is that a bit better, Philip?
Yeah,
is that a bit better? Yes. Sorry about that. Yeah.
I thought I'd mention it, and I thought your name's very appropriate, being greyed out.
Greyed out, yeah, that's it. Yeah. I'm not maybe in the shadows sometimes, but never in the dark.
Yeah.
No, thanks, Philip. No, thanks for that. I've got it's nice to see the light and the sunshine again, but it does impact on my. So yeah, I'll try and make sure I'm visible to colleagues. So thank you.
And you've got the light kind of just obscuring your face now from the sun. It's
yeah.
And anyway, I just
I'll try and adjust my screen so I can get myself in a. There you go. Hope that's slightly better.
You're muted, Sarah.
We'd be looking forward to going back into an office, Alan. Or
I've mixed feelings about it. I mean, we'll all feel different. I mean, 10 hours in front of a screen every day is not great, is it? Whether you're on Teams meetings or working. So yes, I guess I'll be looking to a mix. I've enjoyed. There are some benefits to working from home, so it's been nice to. Have a tea with my wife for the first time since we got married. So that's nice. So never had that new experience. So things like that are quite nice. To have. We've got a wee puppy, so it's nice to be able to spend a wee bit of time with them. But yeah, it would be nice to get back into the office. And I think we'll hopefully find some time in the summer. But I was just sending my sit rep for today. I was looking at the position in Europe compared to UK, and the COVID position in Europe is very different from it is here. So there's that bit about,
I remember a briefing last October, November, where they showed a third wave in Britain, and the curve in Europe is that curve that we saw.
It is, yes. So it's a bit worrying. I'm hoping the vaccine programme here is going to assist us.
Yeah.
I think Europe's something like 11% of the population vaccinated. We're now at 44% in Grampian. I think so. I think we're doing okay. I think in terms of the rollout of that. So,
yeah,
but who knows what's ahead? It's that uncertainty, Sarah. It's that worry, isn't it? How do we manage this and live with it and respond?
Because we're not sure if vaccines will stop us transmitting or whether it'll become. Nobody knows whether we're going to carry on being careful.
I think the early evidence is that you're less ill as a result. So I think COVID is difficult to eliminate a virus once it's in the air in the system. I guess you can't eliminate it, but I think you can hopefully reduce the impact of it on your health. And I think the early indications are that it does reduce the most severe impacts of COVID on health. So we'll just have to keep the fingers crossed. And yeah.
The vaccination program at TECA is an amazing. I was there on Sunday and I was so impressed.
Yeah, it's a good partnership. It's been a bit of a theme of today, actually. And I think it's about that partnership working, and I've certainly seen evidence of that. It's amazing that even from your house, the amount of support you get from colleagues. Sometimes just a call from a colleague in another authority or another area. Often it's still there to help, and the amount of work that's done over a very short space of time, and the tech getting all that agreed, concluded, and dealt with, it was done very, very quickly. And I wasn't amazed because I've come used to now getting a lot of support from colleagues. But again, it was just fantastic that colleagues were there and willing to help.
Yeah.
And they worked some pretty long hours to do it. I've got to say, colleagues, and we're just willing to do it, to be part of it. I think there's something about part of something like that. The tech, I think, it's been part of something that is quite unique, and it's once in a generation. But we have been I think it's very fortunate, Sarah, in this area that we've got that kind of support. So
yeah, absolutely, yes, definitely. As Angela's just typed in, Team Aberdeen. So, okay, I think we're all back. So I will hand over to Alex for the medium-term financial framework.
Thanks, Chair. I'm just wondering why I've got a jacket on. I'm in TECA at the moment, and I'm stuck in a room that's storing food, and it's a bit chilly. I think I've turned the heating down. So yeah, it's. I heard you talking about an ice pack earlier on, and I thought I don't need one of them. I'm cold enough as it is. So you see how we can go over the next wee while in relation to this. I'm just mindful as well of the minute silence at 12 o'clock. So I'll try and keep it as short. But if we do start overrunning a little bit, it'd be great just to keep an eye on that. So I'm pleased to present the medium-term financial framework to the IJB today. On the 10th of March 2020, the IGB agreed the MTFF for 2020-21, and at that time I informed the IGB that we hadn't included any provision for COVID within the medium-term financial framework at that time, as we were unsure about where and when the financial implications would land. The IGB has been provided with regular financial information throughout the financial year, and we've tracked very closely the costs of COVID on our budgets, and the financial implications of these additional costs have been covered by additional funding obtained through the local mobilisation plan. While we now have a better understanding of the costs, what we still need to know is, will these costs be recurring, and what can we do to manage these costs in future? The system, and in particular the social care system, is in a transitional state at the moment as it shifts between potentially two models, and some of that shift reflects the priorities of the IGB around about keeping people in a homely setting for as long as possible. The setting of a budget is always an assessment of an acceptance of risks and assumptions, which we agree on in order to deliver the IGB strategic plan, and this year is no different. There are three new risks that I've highlighted through the medium-term financial framework that I just like to bring to the attention of the IGB. And the first one we've already kind of talked about is about what services and their costs profile will look like in future. The second risk I'd like to kind of highlight is the recommendation, the independent review of adult social care by Derek Feely. And at the moment, we don't know what, if any, of the recommendations from that review will be implemented, and what the financial impact of implementing these recommendations will be, and that could have impacts on the IGB funding. And then the final thing that I would highlight is the impact of the health debt that's been accrued as we've been in lockdown, and that's certainly something that could have an impact on our services as we go through the next financial year. The financial information presented shows a deficit of around £5 to £6 million each year. Within the actual document, I've pushed that out to 7 years from 5, which is what we've previously done. But I've included just the 5 years within the report just to give a flavour, because the profile does largely just accrue each year. This year, we need to focus on understanding the impact of COVID and redesigning services to live within the cost envelope. And I guess one of the things we need to consider is whether the cost envelope will be the same levels as what it has been in the past, as a result of as the country seeks to repay some of the funding that's been spent on COVID. So I guess there is a risk around future funding levels, as you expect, and I'm raising or highlighting that to the IGB just now. The leadership team and services, as we've discussed already today, moved at pace to help support the response to the pandemic, and I think the Chief Executive's made a good point about how we worked in partnership with our partners to do that. Many of the decisions that we made as an IGB were already included within our transformation plans and our strategic plan, and that focus on the move to digital was something that we'd highlighted previously. But many of the other stuff that we've done, we were already in the place to do it. And obviously, with the pandemic came along, we delivered on that much quicker than any of us would have expected to do so, and now we're at a stage where we need to kind of think about what our objectives are going to be for next financial year. So the leadership team have got together and they've agreed the objectives that are in Appendix 4 of the report, and these are all linked through to our transformation plan and the headings within there. We're still doing some work on these objectives, but largely in relation to the services delegated to the IGB, these will be the headings that we go through, subject to you approving the medium-term financial framework today. The report and the appendices set out the detail. The funding from our partners has been confirmed, and the Council's was confirmed, I think it was on the 10th of March 2021 as well, and it's been confirmed on the NHS side as well. So the recommendations of the report are the decisions that are required to move forward the medium-term financial framework for next financial year. Chair, as usual, I'm happy to take any questions, comments, observations on the report, and I'll pass over to you.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you for such a comprehensive report, clearly linking objectives to financial planning. And I think the fact that we've ended up with money in reserves again, and we've managed to balance our budget, and we've never had to go back to our partners for funding, is a really, really important thing to bear in mind. That's not the position in other parts of Scotland, and I think it's a testament to the good relationships, but the fact that we're financially responsible also helps us build good relationships with the partners as well. So, comments and questions for Alex, please. Alan.
Just a few comments. So thanks, Alex, for the report. Very comprehensive, very helpful to see. I guess there's three main elements Alex highlighted. One is the kind of the recurring core budget position for next year, which Alex set out in the plan. He's also talked about the non-recurring COVID monies, which we know is going to be available for next year, and that'll be very helpful. But I suppose the most important bit Alex highlighted, and that links to the bit that Sandra had highlighted earlier, was that strategic planning is in a year's time when the non-COVID or the COVID non-recurring monies disappear. There's quite a large amount of resource that will leave the system. It's knowing how then we can then deliver what we need to deliver in a different ways going forward. So I think Alex highlighted the importance really in the paper today of the strategic planning now, and to get that moving as quickly as we can, whilst managing obviously the current difficult and challenging situation that we're in just now, because that's going to be the real challenge, I think, in a year's time when the non-COVID, because it's about 900 million for Scotland next year, so that's a large sum of money that will perhaps not be there in the following year. It's how we learn to then respond and live with the challenges going forward with that level of non-recurring resource no longer with us. So I welcome the paper, and I think I'll link into the work that we're going to do through the workshops in the coming months.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yes. The strategic plan refresh has come at a very opportune moment, hasn't it? John Tomlinson and then John Cook.
Yes, okay, thanks. Just wanted to preface my comments with a thank you to Alex. I think as chair of RAP, it's been extremely helpful, his stewardship over quite a difficult period. So I think we should acknowledge that and how that's been handled through a kind of volatile year. And that has assisted the committee in terms of its role in terms of trying to give assurance to the board. I think the report is clear and it highlights certainly the risks that Alex has said, the three there, for us to pay particular attention to. I think maybe just add that I think what we'll be looking for RAP to do in seeking that assurance for the board is also tying into the savings. Paragraph 3.5 is how those might need to come in and be on a recurring basis. So we'll need to scrutinise those closely. Hosted services has always been in our sights, and that will remain so, I think, over the coming year. And then the redesign in terms of the whole system. So a lot of progress has been made because of, or in spite of, the last year, and the impact of that will be interesting. We'll need to look at that, especially across NHS and the IJB. So I think it's just to highlight that those aspects will need to be looked at through RAP, but the report that Alex has given us gives us a very sound basis for doing that, I think.
Thank you, John. John Cook.
Thanks. Yeah, just a couple of quick ones. I was actually looking at the proposal to increase contingency reserves to back up to 2.5 million, which we previously had. And I was wondering, is that actually sufficient? Or I couldn't work out where you'd actually find the extra money to increase it. But actually, we do have the option to go back to partner organisations in an emergency as well. As we've seen with COVID, we got extra government money to support that. So I think I'm okay with the 2.5 million level. As I say, if I wanted to increase it, I couldn't work out where on earth we'd get it from. And then the other question I had was around recommendation, I think it's G, sorry, my screen keeps freezing. It's the one around negotiating uplifts for social care contracts not covered by the national contract. And I was just going to ask I'm assuming that will include living wage provision. And I just wondered what other factors might guide that negotiation.
Okay, Alex?
Yep. In relation to the reserve situation, I mean, we've held that reserve at 2.5 million, which was the level that it was like 1% of the budget less the element that was in relation to the set aside services. So that's where the 1% comes from, and we've used that in the past. And I think when we've looked in the past as well, and you know, the movement or at the end of the year, it tends between that level of 3 and 2. I think the point that we're making is that at the moment we need to wait till the end of the financial year to see what the outturn is before we actually have a look at what our reserve strategy is going to be over the next financial year. But certainly, I'm seeking a steer from the board that if given the level of uncertainty within the system, I think it would be wise on the IGB to think about how that comes about. You're exactly right, and it picks up on something Alan said around about, you know, the funding in terms of them being one-off funding potentially available next financial year for some stuff. So we may find that actually our position improves a little bit further as we go through next year and we start reclaiming costs back through the local mobilisation plan as well. So that's something that I'm certainly aware of and working our way through. In relation to the question on the non-national care home contract, I haven't checked the email. I'm maybe taking a little bit of a risk here, but I think there was an email that came in about half an hour ago that suggested that we will be applying 2.2% and that there's a national agreement around about that to cover the Scottish living wage. So I think that's just starting to feed through now and drip through the system. So I prepared the report on the basis that that might be a possibility, because I didn't want to have to come back to you and seek approval on that basis. So it sounds as if that has been agreed and or early, and you know, so we're covered in that respect. But that would be, I'd be expecting, or we will be expecting that the care providers pay the Scottish living wage on that basis.
Thanks, that's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, the discussion on reserves. I mean, a few years ago, there was a lot of unhappiness about IJBs holding reserves at all. And, you know, so the opinion on having reserves has changed. I think it is prudent for us to have reserves given the volatility of the flows of money in and out because of COVID. And also, it gives us a cushion to help reshape services when we know we might have to reshape them to take account of the fact that we won't have the COVID recurring monies in the future. So my view would be that 2.5 is prudent and we should aim to keep that for the year. Right, I've got the notice that it's nearly midday. So before we move on to Luann next, I think we will take our minutes reflection, mark the year of COVID and lockdown. Okay. Okay, thank you for that, everybody. So back to the business at hand with the medium-term financial framework. I think Luann and then Philip.
Thanks, Sarah. I think I would agree with what people have said about the importance of this coming year being the one that we take a bit of a breath and look back over what's happened over the past 12 months. We reflect on that, we learn, and we work with our communities to challenge ourselves to think differently about how we prioritise things so that we can get that stable and sustainable high quality services. So I think that's absolutely the right thing to be doing for this year. And I suppose thinking of my questions for Alex, and I think that the framework that he's laid out gives that very clear direction. We're not talking about salami slicing things, we're talking about system-wide change that gives us that long-term sustainability. So I really welcome the plan and I think it's very helpful. I suppose one of the challenges that I see is I see workforces in there as staff health and well-being is a priority, which is absolutely right. But I think for me it's wider than staff well-being. It's about staff resilience and staff being able to be agile and flexible, because one thing we know for sure is we don't know everything that's going to happen. So maybe something to come back to the IJB with a bit more detail on is how we are supporting and preparing our workforce to be more agile and to have that resilience to be able to adapt as things are going to be required to adapt in the future. So I'm not really looking for an answer unless there's something you want to come back with, Alex, but I do think preparing our workforce and that resilience building is going to be really important for how we go forward in the future. And I have a couple of other points too, but I see Alex has got his hand up.
Yeah, I would just maybe come in there, Chair, and say, yeah, I agree. It's certainly a focus of the leadership team in terms of supporting the health and well-being of staff, particularly through this time, given the challenges that the staff group have actually been through over the last year and the impact that's there. We're working our way through that, and I guess one of the other bits that we're thinking about is this workforce plan and bringing the workforce plan back and revising that. So there may be, I would see something in relation to the agility probably fits quite well into the kind of refresh of the workforce plan, but just mindful that we need to work within the boundaries of the rules and so on of the partner organisations who are the employers of staff. I take the sentiment and agree with that.
Thanks, Alex. That's helpful. Maybe it's something for our planner to look at. And the other area of challenge, I suppose, is care at home, and care home demand has changed quite a lot in the last year. And I suppose it's how we get to a system where funding follows people, rather, and because I think at the moment it's very difficult to predict what care home demand is going to be in the coming year versus who's going to want more care at home, because a lot of that depends on what COVID does, I suppose. So just maybe we need to just have a bit more of time to think about how we manage that sort of ebb and flow of demand in the system for community services. I don't know, Alex, if you've got thoughts on that right now, how we'll approach that in the year ahead.
I'm seeking to undertake a review of social care, which is one of the main elements within the medium-term financial framework, and that would certainly be something that we would be looking at closely within there. As you know, at the moment, the care homes haven't got the occupancy levels that they once did, but we've also got now care at home, and we're spending more on care at home because people want to be, want to live in their own home for as long as they possibly can. I think we need to go through that process and just see where that ends up, because there still will be a requirement for residential care, but there'll also be a requirement for care at home. But what we will struggle with, additional care at home, and then we've got everybody back into the residential care setting. So we need to kind of just figure out how we're going to deal with that and what we're going to do, and that's certainly something that we'll be working our way through. We've obviously provided a lot of support via via the government to social care providers to help them with their sustainability situation as well over the last few years, last year, and again, it looks like that's going to continue. But for how long it continues, it's still the decisions that need to be made. So very much aware of that, and that's what I guess I was referring to in that transitional state which social care or adult social care services are in, and we need to work to move our way through that.
Okay, thank you. And final question, which is a bit hopefully a straightforward answer. The PSIP money and the ADP monies that are ring fenced, are there any sort of time limits on by which we need to have spent or allocated that funding, Alex?
So one of the elements I highlighted in the report that I expect previously the government had been holding on to the underspend on Action 15 PSIP and ADP. That money has now been transferred over to us, so that will have to sit within our reserves as an earmarked reserve. I'm not aware of any time limits, but we've obviously got a requirement to deliver the primary care improvement plan. And that's something that we need to have another look at as an organisation. Is certainly one of the things that's within the objectives is to have a look at that in a bit more detail to see where we go from that. Of course, we end up in a position where the models that are coming along are largely recurring kind of staffing costs or costs around about there, and we end up with an underspend which can be difficult to feed in because to the unless we use temporary posts or and stuff like that. So we need to work together with our GPs to figure out how we do that to best effect, and certainly having the money in our account is helpful. And you know, we, as I say, we need to just work our way through that as best we can.
Thanks, Alex.
Thank you.
Philip.
Thanks, Chair. When you call my name out, then a message popped into my screen and I couldn't get to my buttons. How outrageous is that? Alex, thank you for a very comprehensive report. 60 or 57 pages of a riveting read. I mean, I'm not, it is very comprehensive, which is what we've come to expect from you. So I just really wanted to make one comment. I have one question. Don't look so worried, Chair. So this it struck me as interesting, reducing unscheduled care. I know we spoke about that previously, but and it's possibly also calling upon services of the community rather than community services. So looking after your neighbour, keeping an eye out on your neighbour, and maybe a much more of a public awareness campaign to actually let people know what is available. That's just my comment. My question really is relating to prescribing, and it strikes me as interesting that there's a comment here stopping the prescription of drugs where there is evidence of little clinical value. Do you have any examples of that, and how do you actually bring that information together? Given that all drugs are actually approved by NICE and all this good stuff, and they go through the machinations of what needs to be required, how on earth do you work out there's still evidence of clinical value to a drug? I know you were talking previously about bill for drugs being, being controlled. Thanks.
I think I mean, there's maybe some of my colleagues can help out with that, but I can give you a kind of the process that typically that we've gone through in the past. It's not so much of an issue now because some of that stuff has actually been dealt with already going forward. But there's a primary care or a prescribing group in Grampian, which has pharmacists from each of the areas and from the acute setting, has a GP representations as well around about it, and they have a look at the medicine. So some of the stuff that we've looked at in the past has been homeopathic type of approaches and so on, where they were being prescribed through there. There may be other stuff that comes through, but as I say, it's unlikely that will happen this year because you know, most of the decisions in relation to that have been taken. But I've included that in there just in case there was anything that was advised, and we would need to consider that at that point in time. So all the guidance in that comes from the professionals who undertake a lot of research in relation to that before any decision would be made on it.
Malcolm, yep.
Thanks, sorry, switching on. Yeah, the other problem we've got is that you get new indications for drugs and things which come from nowhere for them. So at the moment, there's a relatively new and consequently relatively expensive diabetic drug, which is going to be used for most patients with heart failure, which is about 1% of the population. So that sort of agent just suddenly comes from nowhere, where you get two very large studies, you sort of are vaguely aware as a specialist that they're going on, and then they arrive, they get licensed, and suddenly you find that you've got an increment in your budget, which is quite great. And Al's quite right, you know, we do tightly regulate drugs otherwise with our pharmacy colleagues, and we have prescribing groups, and we've got formulary groups, and we've got all sorts of things. But at the end of the day, if a drug is licensed and somebody really wants that drug, then it's very hard to prevent that use. So what we've got to do is provide people with the right evidence and try and do our best to move people into a position where they are responsible as possible with drugs. And a big savior for us all has been the advent of generic drugs. So, for example, statins in very common use for lowering cholesterol have really become affordable by becoming generic. And then there are drugs, for example, that thin the blood, which are sort of just about getting to that point of being all generic, which will make them a lot cheaper. Because at first we were worried in the Grampian region that would increase our budget by 3.5 million with one drug alone in the whole of the region. So it is difficult, but we do our best to try and regulate that. But there are these unaccounted things that suddenly come from nowhere. And I feel really sorry for Alex trying to sort a budget out with this because it's really difficult.
Thank you.
Yeah, discussions about prescribing budgets were a regular feature of my first couple of years on the IJB because they were so volatile. Yeah. Maggie.
Thank you for the report, Alex. And I would echo what other people have said about the how clear it is and how easy to read as well. So I appreciate that very much. It's just one point, and it's not really a question. It was concerning the statement on managing demand on page 19 of the report, and it's about reshaping the approach to commissioning services. And it was just really it's just to sort of raise a point around care, the sort of care services out with the sort of staffing groups that will be within the scope of commissioning. And while it's mentioned the largest part of the budget is about commissioning, there are some constraints on the commissioning that can't be moved and therefore can't necessarily be changed, which sometimes leaves the remainder of what can be commissioned, if people are following my thinking, very vulnerable to the impact of any cuts. And there was a sentence at the second paragraph about the focus of the board not being only to deliver services of a better or equivalent quality than currently commissioned, but also to do so at less cost. And I suppose what I'm saying is that doesn't sit, I understand the principle, I understand the need, but just within light of what we've been saying about making sure that our staff and the people who work with the people that we are looking after are nurtured and helped to become resilient, I'm conscious that this statement actually potentially indicates that the focus of reduced service costs will have an impact on the staff out with the core staff teams of the partnership bodies. That's all I was wanted to say. I think I'm on that board, so I'll be, speaking my piece on that board as well. I just thought within the context of the report and what people have been saying about that, I just wanted to raise that point.
Yeah. Alex, do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a difficult position. I mean, as you see this year, we're you know, we had a gap of 5 million, and it's likely to be the same in future years, and that's based on funding levels that you know at the moment are you know potentially at risk. So we need to work through that. But I think there is an important point that you know there's a certain bit about it's transforming or changing service delivery, and you know you're getting the same services but at the same price. But what we will have a problem with is if we can't transform service delivery at less cost, because we won't be able to balance future years of budget unless we can actually go through that. Now, I think Maggie raises an important point that you know this shouldn't all fit or sit on commissioning, and it certainly won't. And that's why we're looking at that kind of review around that area. The other protections that are put in place are in relation to if we were going to decommission something, then it would have to come back to the board to be agreed anyway, so you would get a sight of it then. But also moving into that kind of approach is, you know, is that kind of consulting with the service users and also consulting with the current providers around about these decisions before they're actually made. So when you get that information coming to the IGB, you will have all the details that you need if you decide to agree the recommendations to decommission. But I think I understand what Maggie's saying, and there's no intention for this all to fall on one particular group or one area. But if we can't reduce costs across the piece, then we will have problems in future years. And I think that's the message that I think I need to give to the board, but given the financial pressures that we're likely to face in future financial years.
Yeah, and I understand the anxiety that providers have. It's a third of our budget though, and it's not like we're not asking other parts of the service to transform at the same time. And I think there's been some useful work done about collaboration rather than competition among providers. You know, we're definitely leading the way on that. And that's one of the main recommendations of the independent review of adult social care. And I also hear what Maggie's saying about some services seem to be excluded from the need to change because of the nature of the service. They're complex service users, they're often tied to homes and buildings. Actually, I think we need to look at them. You know, we know that some of those services are provided in buildings now that aren't fit for purpose. And if we were, you know, if we take a decision to improve a service for somebody, and that means that they move, then we need to manage that process and consult and inform them properly. But I think what I'm trying to say is we shouldn't assume that just because we've decided not to change a service previously, that will always be our decision. But we need to do the work properly before the decision was made, as Alex has said. And actually, finally tackling the issue of out-of-area placements is really, really important, and particularly when we're looking at transition from young people into adult services as well. And local provision of that and collaborating with the other IJBs and with partners on that is really important. Okay. Right. Anything else, Maggie? Do you want to come back or no? I don't see any other.
Fine, thank you.
All right. Right. I don't see anybody else's hands up, so I think, shall we move to the recommendations then? We've had a discussion on that. I think it's page 87, is it? No, page 137, 38. So we're noting the outturn for 2021 and the impact on the reserves. We're noting the allocations proposed by the partner organisations. We're approving the 21-22 budget and the Aberdeen City medium-term financial framework included at Appendix 1. We're noting the intention to earmark £2.5 million in a risk fund at the end of the financial year. We're approving the Bonacore Care contract level for 21-22 of 30,304,000 and the budget assumptions noted in 317 and 318. We're instructing the Chief Financial Officer to uplift the direct payments for clients with a staffing element included in their payment by 2.2% from the 1st of May to cover the increase in the Scottish Living Wage. We're instructing the Chief Finance Officer to negotiate uplifts for those social care providers not covered by the National Care Home contract. We're instructing the Chief Finance Officer to apply a higher uplift should a higher national inflationary rate be agreed for direct payments and contracts not covered by the National Care Home contract, on the proviso that additional funding is provided to cover any shortfall. And we're making the budget directions contained in Appendix 2 and instructing the Chief Finance Officer to issue those directions to the constituent authorities. Are we all content with those recommendations? That's fine, thank you. And thank you, Alex, for all your work on this very comprehensive and clear report. No ice packs were needed to read it at all. I was just being cheeky. Okay, that concludes the public section of our business. So we'll turn the recording off and we'll move